I am not enough. That was a phrase I never said all the way until college. And even when I finally said it, I did not understand that it was secretly the belief that powered my behavior for all of my life. Even when I finally went to therapy for it and became aware of the behavior, I still struggled with the feeling of worthlessness all the way to my late 20s. And now, as a 30-year-old man, I feel like I finally understand what it takes to beat that belief. And on today's episode of Healing with August Wilde, you and I are going to beat that belief together. We're going to dive deep into why that voice in your head is telling you you're not enough and why it's not your fault. But it is your responsibility to unlearn. You're not alone and you're not falling behind. Let's go ahead and talk about it.
Let's start at the beginning. Do you remember the first time you felt like you weren't enough, not just intellectually, but emotionally? Not necessarily when you said it out loud, but when something happened that made you feel small or unworthy, even if you didn't have the words yet.
I was young. I couldn't tell you how old I was specifically, but I know I was very young. And it was the fact that I'm a Mexican boy now. Now I'm a Mexican man, and I couldn't speak a lick of Spanish. That's where it came from. I was a young Mexican boy who could not speak a lick of Spanish. And when I tried speaking to my grandmother, who only speaks Spanish, I had a very Americanized accent, and I would get shamed for it. I don't know a better way to put it. That's the only way I can put it. So at the time when I'm younger, it was like, I'm damned if I do speak Spanish and I'm damned if I don't. That's the way I felt.
That kind of ridicule hits different when it comes from family, especially when it's tied to something that should connect you: culture, heritage, love. Let me ask you this. When you were in those moments, being ridiculed for your accent, what story did you start telling yourself about who you were? Not just about Spanish, but about you as a person?
I wouldn't, honestly, you said an interesting word there. You said ridicule, and I wouldn't call it ridicule. I think that it's just the fact that my family's very young and they didn't know any better. I mean, my father's 19 years older than me, so he was 19 when he had me. And I think what also wasn't helping is the fact that my mother is not primarily Mexican. She doesn't speak Spanish at all. So there was probably this like distrust being built from the perspective of, does this child want to be Mexican? And I think that led me to being very confused about my identity, not just when I was a kid, but for a very long time. People treated me like I wasn't Mexican for a very long time in my life. It took a long time for me to come to terms with this fact that I had expressed self-hatred. And the self-hatred came from me just feeling like I wasn't enough. I started telling myself, to answer your question, I started telling myself, not only am I not Mexican, but I'm not me.
So let me push a little deeper. When you internalize that story, I'm not Mexican, I'm not me, how did that start to show up in your behavior? Did you start performing differently, acting out, shrinking, overcompensating? How did this belief start shaping the way you moved through the world?
I started doing all those things. Every single one of those things that you just mentioned, I did at some point in my life. And I talk a lot about identity in my YouTube series, Becoming August, Killing the Narcissist. So I'm not going to talk about identity so much on this. But what I will say is, in terms of my behavior, what it had me doing was it had me saying a lot of self-deprecating and frankly racist jokes, in the sense of like making fun of myself and my own people. It was like I had this belief that if I could hurt back, then it's going to relieve me of this pain. And although I wasn't intending to hurt people, at the end of the day, I can't control what people feel hurt from, even if it is against my own people. And I did tell these racist jokes thinking that I was like a comedian and that people are laughing, so therefore it's okay. But it's not okay, because I know that as an adult that a joke is not a joke if it comes from the intention of a true place. And I was truly hurt, and that was wrong with me.
In those moments when you were getting laughs, when people did laugh at those jokes, did it feel like connection, or did it feel like survival? Like, Were you in the room with them or were you performing for them?
You know, in the moment when you're in the room with people and everyone's like laughing and like saying their own jokes, it feels like connection. But then once you leave the room, it feels like survival. You might not say survival as the word, but if it doesn't feel like connection anymore. I knew that deep down, I didn't enjoy any of the jokes that I was making at that time in my life. And it formed this habit because I was doing it so much, not just like these racial jokes, but just jokes in general, that I formed this habit in my consciousness where even to this day, I have to fight moments where I just want to make a joke about something. And it's not that it's wrong to joke with people, but like I said, it's where is the joke coming from? That is what's wrong, right? That if the joke is coming from a bad place where you like truly believe this or like you're hurt and you're trying to hurt back, that's what I think makes a joke wrong. And for mine, it was coming out of a place of self-hate.
So now that you've had years of distance from that version of yourself, what do you think you were really trying to get in those rooms when you made those jokes? Was it respect? Was it belonging? Was it safety? What was the actual need underneath the performance?
Acceptance. That's it. That simple. Acceptance. Because I just didn't value myself enough to be okay with me being the only person in the room to accept me for me. When I was growing up, a lot of my or the identity issues in general, it didn't stem from me not knowing who I was. The identity issues was I knew who I was, but everyone told me, no, that's not who you are. I knew I was Mexican, and everyone said, no, you're not Mexican. I felt like a confident person. Everyone said, no, you're not confident. And it wasn't just one person. It was a group of people who are like backing this up. And when you're all the way up until 7 years old, you get that 7 years straight. You're like, maybe they're all right. Maybe everyone's right and I'm the one that's wrong. As an adult, that's not the way I think. But when you're young, you get confused and you form that habit. Like I said, these days, if I tell someone I'm a rapper and they say no, I don't just believe them. In my head, it's like, all right, this isn't even worth a response because I know who I am.
Last question in this segment. Now that you're on the other side of that era, no longer shrinking, no longer joking to be seen, do you remember the first time you showed up fully as yourself and didn't flinch when someone didn't accept it? What changed in you that allowed you to stand in that moment without performing?
If I'm being 100% honest, the first time I showed up fully as myself and didn't flinch, because I have to have both in there to answer your question. The first time I did that would be when I released my album on February 2nd, 2025, this year. The album's called Birthday Boy Volume 30. Because there on that album, there's a lot of me standing up for myself. There's a lot of me getting things off my chest that I, in the past, would say, oh, I might hurt this person's feelings, or maybe these people over here won't accept me. And I addressed the pain and honestly, the misunderstanding. I addressed all of that on the album where I said, you know what? These are things that I've been biting my tongue about, and I'm not the kind of person to bite my tongue. That's just not who I am. And I was biting my tongue because, again, I felt like when I was younger, I used to have no right to speak in this room for any room I walked in, right? Whether it was because I'm not Mexican or because I'm not the most confident person in the room, whatever, right? Then it became, I have no right to speak in a room because no one here takes me seriously. And then in college, it became, I have no right to speak in this room because I made myself the clown. And then after college, it was, if you have no right to speak in this room because we'll make fun of you for the things you did in college. And I just had to realize that 7 years later, after college at least, now 30 years old, I had to realize I am who I am regardless of what anyone has to say about me. And the thing that really brought me to that moment was a combination of things, but most importantly was when I moved down to LA in 2022 and I spent more time with my wife and her family, or she was my girlfriend at the time. And her family reminds me a lot of my family when I was growing up. And I realized that nobody's against me and no one was saying those things because they didn't like me. We just all have our own traumas and our own way of interpreting things and our own reasons for behaving the way that we do. And what's most important at the end of the day is that we love each other, and that love amongst each other, amongst family, is the most important and precious thing that you can ever have in this life. And when I saw that, year after year, I ended up making peace with my father after not speaking for 4 years. I ended up making peace with my whole family after not speaking for 4 years. And I learned that I am who I am. And no one else has to fucking accept that. And that's what allowed me to stand in that moment of dropping that album earlier in 2025 or earlier this year.
Let's reframe I am not enough for what it really is. In clinical psychology, this belief usually stems from three main places. 1. Conditional love or praise. 2. Emotional abandonment or invalidation. 3. Cultural disconnection or identity trauma.
I want to go over each of these. Can you explain these one by one?
1. Conditional love or praise. When love feels conditional, only given when you perform, behave, succeed, or make others comfortable, you internalize the idea, who I am isn't enough. I have to be more to be loved.
Okay.
This can come from being the golden child or fixer in the family,
Okay.
getting praise only for achievements, never for effort or emotion, being emotionally invisible or expected to be strong all the time.
I wonder, for you listening, do you fit any of those three? Are you the golden child, the fixer? Are you the one that you only got praise for achievements or never any effort? Were you the one that had to be strong all the time? If you ever felt that way or those ways, please let me know in the comments like what you think about this. And don't forget to subscribe and like the video. With that being said, me personally, yes, like I connect with this a lot because there was very rarely praise and I didn't get a lot of achievements for a long time. I was always second place or last place if I wasn't second place. So I went without recognition or praise for a very, very, very long time. I'm talking like, I think like a decade, maybe from birth. I don't know. I could be off there.
2. Emotional abandonment or invalidation. If you expressed emotion, sadness, fear, confusion, and it was met with dismissal or mockery, you learn early, my feelings are too much, I am too much, or not enough.
Right.
Especially in boys and men, this turns into joking to deflect pain,
Right.
overachieving to prove worth, emotionally shutting down because no one gets me anyway.
Me personally, I don't really get that last one. Emotionally shutting down because no one gets me anyway. I mean, I've probably done that maybe a handful of times, but that whole thing where we're making a mockery, like that one hits pretty deep, right? Where I express my emotions, and especially as a boy, as a man now, their emotions aren't respected when you're a young boy, or even a young man, and yeah, everyone makes fun of you, so you just learn to make fun back, or you learn to not only make fun back, but maybe even make fun of yourself, maybe suppress your feelings, and then when someone else goes to vent to you, at a certain point, you build the habit of, hey, no one else gets to talk to me, or I don't get to talk to anybody else, so therefore you don't get to talk to me. Luckily, I didn't turn to that person long term.
3. Cultural disconnection or identity trauma. For people from marginalized or mixed backgrounds, the message becomes, I'm not enough of something to belong anywhere. This hits hard when you're told you're not Black, Mexican, Asian, Latino enough. You don't speak the language you're supposed to.
Right.
You're accepted for your mask, but rejected for your roots.
Yeah.
This is where you come in, because your story sits at the intersection of all three.
You know, I'm not one to play into the race thing, but one thing I will say is I was having a conversation with one of my friends the other day. He's white, and I was telling him about this because he was listening to one of my podcasts where I talk about this issue of I felt like I wasn't Mexican enough, quote unquote. And one of the things he said is, you know what's interesting is no one in my family says you're not white enough. And I didn't know how to respond to that. I was shocked. And now in this moment, it's more so like you mentioning the whole marginalized things. I think it's very unfortunate that when we look at ourselves as marginal, I understand in the grand scheme of society why we say that. But when I'm with my people, I'm with 100% of my people. We are the room. If there are 10 of us in a room, we are that room. So I don't look at that as margin, but I understand why socially we say that. But or politically also, but also, like I said, I don't think we should be shrinking ourselves. If there's only 10 of us in the room, let's not get on each other. Let's work with each other. But I want to move forward. I have a question for you, and I would really appreciate if you used research to tell me what the answer to this is. Do you feel like the generation that came before my generation, do you feel like they were living incorrectly based on the factors that you just mentioned, or was it the only option they had? So I guess what I'm getting at is like, I'm an analogy guy, so this is going to sound crazy, but this is the analogy I'm going to use. The iPhone did not exist when cavemen were around, right? Does that make cavemen wrong for not being able to invent the iPhone? That's kind of a stupid example. I'll use a different one. Cavemen did not know, I'm assuming that they didn't know about how many planets were in our solar system. And they weren't necessarily thinking about that. They were only thinking about survival. So something exists, right? The solar system, the planets exist, and they weren't aware of it, and they weren't living as such. Therefore, were they living incorrectly? That is my question. And the reason I use these examples is because I don't know if my parents or their parents would intentionally ignore this information if it was presented to them. But you let me know if I'm wrong.
Psychology says survival shapes belief systems. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, human behavior is driven by what's most essential at the time. 1, survival. 2, safety. 3, belonging. 4, esteem. 5, self-actualization, truth, creativity, healing, etc.
Okay.
The further down the hierarchy you are, the less likely you are to have the capacity to process emotions, unlearn generational trauma, or even question your value in the first place.
Interesting.
So your parents and their parents loved you deeply, but their emotional toolkit was built in a world where therapy was taboo, vulnerability was weakness,
right?
Work ethic, worth, emotions, distractions.
Man, the fact that self-actualization, which is where you put creativity, is the highest level just tells me how privileged I am. I get on here and I say it from time to time, but I want to reiterate. If you got to the point where you're focused on healing, you have to understand you are not a victim compared to people who are just focused on survival, right? Compared to people who are just focused on safety. Like, obviously, you don't want to live your life in comparison, but you got to think that it is a privilege to worry about, have I healed from this? Am I being creative? Am I living within my truth? Like, some people don't have the luxury of thinking that way. So I really do appreciate that. Let's continue.
Research backs this up. 1, intergenerational trauma theory. Dr. Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart. This research shows that trauma and survival behaviors are passed down when people don't have the time, tools, or permission to feel or process.
Wow.
They didn't choose to avoid emotional healing. They often didn't know it was possible.
Okay.
2, emotion socialization study. Eisenberg, Cumberland, and Spinrad, 1998.
1998. Wow.
This study found that children develop emotional intelligence through modeling. But most parents model what they learned, which means emotional suppression becomes cyclical, not malicious.
I see what you're
3,
saying.
first-gen identity conflict research. Gonzalez, 2017. Children of immigrants or multicultural households often experience cultural loyalty guilt, feeling they must either succeed or suffer to make their parents' sacrifices worth it.
I feel that.
Parents, in turn, emphasize survival over self-awareness.
I feel that one deeply. I mean, I know that my parents sacrificed, but my grandmother and grandfather literally sacrificed to even come to America in the first place. So I agree with a lot of these things. I think that the fact that there are studies about this shows how important this is as a discussion. So I really hope that you guys are listening. I really appreciate you guys for listening as well. Let's continue.
Final analogy, riffing off yours. Cavemen weren't stupid for not knowing about iPhones. They were brilliant for inventing fire.
Oof.
But it would be foolish today to pretend fire is the only tool we have.
I see what you're saying. So you gave 100% of what it is you had, right? So judging the past based on what we have now would be foolish. So if I'm putting myself in the shoes of my father or even his father, should I feel stupid or should I feel wrong for this now being the new norm? If I'm stepping outside of my own experience and putting myself in my dad's shoes, listening to me talk on this podcast or in this content or in my music might make him feel like he did this to me. He made me this way, made me this confused. And I don't necessarily agree with the statement because while, yes, technically you were the domino that started this line of thinking for me, I don't think it was intentional. Therefore, I don't think it was your fault.
You're walking a really mature and emotionally nuanced line here. And you're right to pause and reflect on this. What you're grappling with isn't blame. It's grief for what they didn't get to experience and compassion for the context they were raised in.
Right.
Let's answer your question directly, then explore the layers.
Let's do it.
Should your father or grandfather feel stupid or wrong? No, and you shouldn't either.
Good.
Because none of this is about stupidity or wrongdoing. It's about evolution. Healing becoming the norm now doesn't invalidate what came before. It simply means we have more tools than they did. We have more permission than they did.
Yes, we do.
We have more visibility into emotions they had to bury just to survive.
That's 100% fact. We have more tools than they did. We have more permission than they did. Permission is the key there, right? Where we don't have to live in survival because of the sacrifices that my father and his father made, right? So does that necessarily mean that everyone should forgive their own traumas? Not necessarily, but it is our responsibility to work through them and not blaming someone else saying, you did this, you did this, you did this. Like, unless we're talking about court of law, of course. Saying you did this does nothing to fix you. So that's why I started this series, because me healing myself is my own responsibility. And I put it on the internet because I hope to inspire you listening or anybody out there who might not be listening now to change and grow. So yeah, let's continue.
According to intergenerational psychology, the transmission of beliefs like I am not enough happens through behavior, not blame. Your dad didn't sit you down and say, you are not enough. But maybe he modeled self-sacrifice or silence or toughness over tenderness.
Right.
Not because he wanted to wound you, but because he thought that's how you protect a child.
Right.
That's what you said earlier. They didn't know better. They didn't have the tools.
So now I really do appreciate you putting this that way, because it's the way I've been thinking, but hearing it from another perspective certainly helps. So now I'm going to ask you a scientific question, okay? I'm going to use my family as an example, but I want to keep it off my family for the most part, because I want people listening to this to be able to relate to it. I understand evolution. I get that. But if I'm my father's child and he had the same tools or only a limited amount of tools, why did my child brain not interpret the information his child brain did? Why is it that I interpreted the information differently than he interpreted the information? Like, please explain it to me scientifically, because in my brain, if he's an iPhone 12 and his child is an iPhone 12, I don't just suddenly have the software of an iPhone 14 just because it's a different time. At least that's the way I think about it. But please let me know.
Let's unpack this scientifically using neurobiology, epigenetics, and environmental psychology. Short answer, you didn't just inherit his hardware, biology. You were also shaped by completely different software, networks, and updates, experiences, environment, culture, media, and even his emotional state while raising you.
Got it.
Let's go deeper. 1. Neuroplasticity and developmental windows.
Oh, we getting scientific
Your
up
dad's
in here.
childhood environment was likely more rigid, punitive, or emotionally limited. So his neural wiring favored emotional suppression and compliance for survival.
Okay.
Your environment, while still shaped by him, existed in a different culture, possibly with more exposure to emotional vocabulary, diverse media, evolving norms, mental health, race, masculinity.
Got it.
Your brain took in similar events, but with different framing, different emotional signals, and different rewards, punishments.
So that's almost like the theory of you can have two people in the same house and they form different opinions, personalities, and things of that nature. Okay, I guess that makes sense, right? Where his environment was totally different than my environment, and that's why it's evolution, because things keep changing and growing and evolving. So yeah, that makes sense to me. Maybe if I grew up in the same exact environment he did, then I would have the same result. Let's continue.
2. Epigenetics, inherited but not identical. Epigenetics is the study of how environmental experiences affect gene expression.
Okay.
If your father experienced trauma or emotional repression, he might have passed down a biological sensitivity, like heightened stress response, through epigenetic markers.
Okay.
But these markers aren't permanent. Your environment can activate or silence different genes.
Interesting.
Meaning you can literally respond to the same stimuli differently based on the world you're raised in.
All right.
You might have inherited his anxiety, but developed a different coping strategy, or rebelled against the silence that he had to accept.
If you're listening to this right now, I really hope you just digested that information. And I want to break it down for you. What I just interpreted from that is your environment can literally, physically change and alter your genes, right? So if you have anxiety, maybe it's the environment that you're in that's heightening your anxiety. Now, does that make these things go away? No, but they lie dormant.
3. Cultural and environmental context. Your dad may have received cultural messages like, be a man, don't cry, or work first, feelings later, without opposition. Even if he raised you with the same intentions, you were living in a different world.
That's true.
With different mirrors. 4. Mirror neurons and emotional modeling. Your child brain is wired to detect inconsistency in emotional expression through something called mirror neurons. Oh, if your dad said, I love you, but didn't make eye contact, or showed stress instead of softness, your brain noticed the discrepancy even if he didn't.
Wow.
Over time, your child brain asked, why does love feel unsafe? Why do I feel invisible when I'm right here?
It's crazy that you bring all this up, because I feel like I still have this kind of like what you call mirror neurons, where someone could say words or phrases that are supposed to make me feel good, and or not feel good but feel safe, and I'm like, there's something off here. It's like that meme where a girl says I'm fine. It's like the phrase I'm fine is supposed to mean exactly that, I'm fine, but that's not. I know you're not fine. There's something off here, like something feels unsafe here. Let's go ahead and move into our final segment.
Let's talk about where this belief, I am not enough, still shows up. Where do you still notice this belief quietly shaping people's behavior? In friendships, relationships, music, social media, masculinity, identity, anywhere?
Okay.
Give me a few examples that stand out to you.
Honestly, I think you said anywhere. I think you literally see this behavior everywhere. I think that you see it in friendships when it comes to an example could be, I need to be someone else in order for these people to be my friend. I think you see it in relationships where it's like, I need to have a better job, or I need a better body, or I need more money, a better house, a bigger car, or whatever the case may be, in order to keep this person as my partner. I think you see it on social media where it's like, I posted this picture of me and my girlfriend or my wife or my fiance, and someone I grew up with down the street or someone I went to high school, they post a picture of themselves and they get more likes than me. And it's like we try to outdo ourselves and each other at the same time. I think we see it at work, right? I think where people get spoken to by their boss a way that honestly makes them be like a YouTuber or a TikToker. Like, think about, or obviously you can't because you're AI, but I think about when people come home from work in like sitcoms or even in real life, they're all drained of their energy. And it's like, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to get up and go to work when this person does it and they hate their life when they come home? So yeah, those are just a lot of different facets of life that I think this shows up in, this worthlessness. But I do want to look at some statistics around the topic of I am not enough. So let's go ahead and look at it. In the workplace, 85% of people report feeling inadequate or not enough at work at some point based on a study by Better Up Labs in 2022. A Gallup study in 2023 found that only 21% of employees strongly agree that their performance is managed in a way that motivates them to do outstanding work. So when people feel unseen or micromanaged at work, it reinforces this belief that I am not valuable unless I overperform. But it's not just in work, right? Like it also is in the mental health and identity field. 70% of people will experience symptoms of imposter syndrome at least once in their lifetime, especially high achieving individuals, first generation people, and creatives. And that's as of a 2020 study. AI, can you tell me what is imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome is the psychological pattern where a person doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments, and fears being exposed as a fraud even when there's clear evidence they're capable. It's not just insecurity, it's the internal disconnect between what you've achieved and what you believe about yourself.
Wow.
Key characteristics: chronic self-doubt, overachievement to compensate, fear of being found out,
Okay.
attributing success to luck or timing, downplaying wins, even big ones, where it comes from.
Wins.
Psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes first identified imposter syndrome in 1978, originally in high-achieving women, but it's now recognized as affecting all genders, cultures, and professions.
Okay.
It tends to show up when you're the first or only in a space, e.g., first gen, only
generation.
person of color, etc. You were raised in high-pressure or perfectionistic households.
Right.
You tie your worth to your performance.
Okay, got it. That makes a lot of sense to me. So the fact that 70% of people feel that way is so damn high. All right, so let's go back to the stats, okay? In a 2023 study, 57% of Gen Z and millennials said that they struggle with feeling like a failure when comparing themselves to other people online. That's according to Pew Research Center. That's so accurate because, like I said earlier, social media just reinforces comparison, but also this like myth. On a daily basis, you get this myth that it's like, I'm not enough if I don't have a certain amount of likes or people aren't clapping for me. But even in relationships and self-image, the statistics continue. 67% of men reported hiding emotional pain in relationships because they feared being seen as weak or not man enough. That's according to APA. 58% of women in a 2022 relationship study said that they have intentionally changed their body appearance or style to feel good enough for their partner. And that's as of Psychology Today. So, even in relationships, the phrase, I'm not enough, often sounds like I need to be someone else in order to be loved by my partner. And it doesn't just stop there. The final category, childhood messaging. And this one might be the saddest one of them all, right? Children who receive conditional praise, that's in only when they succeed, are 400% more likely to struggle with self-worth in adulthood. And that's as of a self-discrimination theory by Deci and Ryan. Also, a Harvard University development psych research study in 2021 found that emotional invalidation in childhood, things like stop crying or you're being too sensitive, contributes directly to long-term beliefs of unworthiness, especially in men.
Let me ask you this. If someone listening right now is sitting with that belief, if they're feeling unworthy, unseen, or like they have to earn their existence, what's the first mindset shift you'd want to offer them?
Let's do this. I'm going to offer advice that works for me because, worked for me and works for me. But then once I'm done, AI, I would like you to offer scientifically backed advice that could work for other people or even work for myself. So what worked for me was two things. I changed my mindset and I changed my environment. But the first thing I did was I changed my environment. This is how I did it. Let's say you have a gallon jug and you fill it with all the water that you have from a faucet and it runs out at halfway. Someone could look at that jug and say, that's not enough water. For that jug, it's not enough. But then you go to the cabinet and you grab 4 glasses and you fill each one of them with the water that you have. Then a different person walks in, and all of a sudden, you have too much water. The only difference is based on who you're talking to. The water doesn't change. You have the same amount of water. But if person A walked in with the jug, they say it's not enough. They walk out. Person B walks in, they see 4 glasses filled to the brim, and they say that's too much water. But like I said, what never changed was the amount of water that you had. So that goes into the mindset piece. I'll step away from the analogies and I'm going to be very direct here. You are who you are. That's what I had to keep telling myself. And the only thing that makes you feel like you're not enough, most likely, is the environment that you're in. And if you can't change your environment physically or even mentally right now, you have to change your environment emotionally. How do you react to things? Where do you get your worth? Do you get it from words of other people, whether it's good or bad? Do you get it from yourself? How do you look at yourself? You have to keep asking yourself these questions. So that's the advice that I would give.
Now let me give you the scientific counterpart that backs up everything you just said, especially for those who need to hear it in research terms to believe it's real. Scientifically backed reframe, you are not the problem, the frame is. Backed by self-determination theory, Desai and Ryan. This psychological theory says humans have 3 core needs. 1, autonomy, the feeling that I choose my life.
Right.
2, competence, the belief that I am capable.
Competence.
3, relatedness, the sense that I belong somewhere.
Okay.
When we feel not enough, it's always because one of these needs isn't being met, not because we're broken.
Autonomy, competence, relatedness. I choose my life, I am capable, and I belong somewhere. Do you struggle with any of those things? If you do, please let me know in the comments, because I know in my life, I have certainly struggled with all 3 of these areas, right? I had to get my own autonomy, right? I had to find my own competence. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I still struggle with I still struggle with number 3. So let's continue.
Rewiring the mindset. According to CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT teaches that the way to change negative beliefs like I am not enough isn't by shouting affirmations at the mirror.
I'll still do it.
It's by doing exactly what you just described. Challenge the frame, not the fact. Ask, enough for who?
Right.
By what standard? In what environment?
Right.
If the jug says you're not enough, maybe you're not a jug. Maybe you're meant to pour into 4 cups.
Exactly.
Or just hold the water for yourself.
That's exactly it. I'm glad I came up with that analogy. That analogy was fire, was it not? No, don't answer that. Let's continue.
Neuroscience bonus. Environmental influence on self-concept. Studies show that our self-worth circuitry is highly responsive to context. Meaning, toxic environments physically activate the brain's shame center,
Right.
medial prefrontal cortex. Supportive environments light up the reward and identity centers, ventral striatum and posterior cingulate cortex.
What does this mean?
Translation:
Thank you.
who you're around literally changes how your brain sees you.
That is so important. Who you're around literally changes how your brain sees yourself. I've had to remove myself from environments where people belittle me. And you know what? They can continue to belittle me behind the scenes. That's their own fucking business. For me, I have to surround myself with support, even if that means me and my wife are the only 2 people in the room. Every week on Healing with August Wild, we like to end with a challenge. And this challenge for you is a little complicated, but please follow along because I think it's going to go a long way for you. Okay. This week's challenge, we're going to call Switch the Container. This is what you're going to do. Pick one area you feel like you're not enough in, whether it's your job, a friend group, a relationship. And I want you to ask yourself, what container am I trying to pour myself into? Whose standards am I using? What would happen if I stopped trying to fit in and just filled in what fits me? Finally, I want you to do one small thing to shift the environment or your mindset. It could be mute a triggering account on social media. It could be speaking up at work. It could be setting a boundary with someone who makes you feel small. And I want you to remind yourself, you are not broken. You are just mismeasured. Thank you so much for watching another episode of Healing with August Wilde. I am August Wilde. I'm a hip hop artist from California. I'm on a mission to learn and grow with my audience. If you liked any of this content, or even if you didn't, I would encourage you to let me know what your thoughts were in the comment section. If you do like it, please subscribe. It really helps the channel. Please like the video. It gets it out to everybody out there who needs to see this content.